Grown and Growing podcast, episode number 49, Designing a Life on Your Terms with Yadira Santana-Dowling. You're listening to Grown and Growing with Sonia Hamlin.
This is part of living abundantly, right? I'm a Christian. So it's like when God said live it abundantly, it's not to live haphazardly or too cautiously or to fit and check somebody else's boxes. We've gone through that, right? Like checking the boxes that somebody else set for ourselves. You know, I think that you realize, wait a minute, what do I want to do? And I check in with myself often.
Welcome back to the Grown and Growing podcast. This week, I am talking to my friend of 20 years, Yadira Santana-Dowling, about designing a life on your terms. I invited Yadira specifically for this episode because she has created a life that is uniquely her own. In my opinion, she has done an amazing job of creating a life that uniquely works for her and her family. And she has bucked tradition, and she seems to make decisions that are free from outside influences. It really is based on what works for her and her family. So what does designing a life on your terms look like? To me, it is a life that is not reactionary. And let's be fair, life can throw us some serious curveballs that you'll often find yourself on the defense. But the goal, I think, is not to stay in that defensive stance your entire life. The goal is really to envision your life going a different way and then set about every day to go after that life. And maybe you can't do that in all aspects of your life. Maybe your work life is a hot mess and there's very little you can do about that due to your circumstances. But maybe you can design the life at home that you want for yourself. So it is in big and small ways trying to take back pieces of your life to make it so that it is the life that works specifically for you. I want to throw this caveat out there about the conversation that I have with Yadira. She does have a husband who is supportive and completely aligned with the life choices here. And I know people will say that is a privilege. It is a privilege. But I want you to think past that, to understand that this life is available to you, whether you are partnered or not, because Yadira's life is completely her own. And the goal is for you to design a life that is completely your own. And ultimately, that is the key to designing a life on your terms. Now, let's get into this episode. Welcome back to the podcast, Yadira. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here.
Good. I'm glad you got your good lipstick out for me. I feel very privileged that you got the pink on. I love it.
Yes.
So we're here today because the focus of this podcast is about redesigning or designing the life that you want. And I think out of all of, my friends, when I think about what you have done in your life, you have designed a life that is uniquely yours, that specifically works for you. And oftentimes I think people get stuck thinking that they can't make the changes, that they can't design their life because of a job or because of a family situation. And I just want to tell your story and how you went about designing your life in that way. So, but before we get started, Grown and Growing podcast. So I want to start off by asking you, when is the last time you felt really grown?
I think that the last time I felt really grown was last night. I was discussing with my husband our daughter's birthday wishes. She wants to go to New York and spend the weekend with her grandparents and her aunt. And we were trying to decide if she gets to miss school to extend that a little bit for her birthday. And I felt like in the past, I would have been like, no, you can't miss school. That's priority. And now it's like, I'm the mom. I get to make this decision. And this is for her life. And it's going to be a gift. And it's only half a day that she's missing. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, you make me feel better because I recently just made a decision where Hunter is going to be missing school, not for half a day, but for 3 days. And I'm kind of whispering because I know he's probably listening to me. But I can tell you more on that later. Okay, so you felt grown making big girl decisions, making grown woman decisions about the happiness of your child and choosing the memory over a half day of school. So, which I think is awesome.
Breaking the rules, essentially. Like, yes.
Exactly. Okay, so what was the last experience that let you know that you were growing?
Well, I just celebrated 18 years of marriage. And I think that the way we approach our anniversaries, we always take the time that day to chat about what's next, reflect on the last 18 years. So in that conversation, as we are talking, we acknowledge how much we have grown, how we have allowed each other space to become the adults that we are intended to be, and how we've shed some of the immature things that when you're young, you don't realize they're immature, but when you're older, you're like, that's a bit, for example, like that people don't change, that, this is what I chose and you better not change. That was early 20s thinking, not anymore. Actually, it's a gift to be able to witness somebody's change and growth alongside you.
And be happy that they're evolving with you. So congratulations. Happy anniversary. I was in the wedding. So, oh my gosh, it seems like yesterday. But congratulations for that. And that actually brings me to the topic when you're thinking about, how you've handcrafted your life. You haven't done that alone. You've done that with a partner. And how important is, how do you guys navigate that together when you're thinking about your life and the changes you're making? How do you navigate that with Elvin?
So I think it goes back from the start. I think we both chose one another because we were so aligned on values first, right? Like what the vision that we have for life and the idea that we had for marriage and for family was very much aligned, which is why I think we ended up with each other, right? So when the time comes, and I'm like a planner person, agenda planning, vision boarding type of person, right? So in advance, I always start to imagine the things that I would like, and he's my first bouncing board, right? And I get to discuss with him, like, you know what, I would love to spend the summer in another country for the children to give them that immersive experience. And he's like, okay, let's do it. Let's sit down and plan it. And where would we go? And start looking at different places and narrowing down from there. Or even moving from, across state lines. That decision was a scary one because, as you know, I lived close to my family when my children birthed the first two kids. And making that decision to move away was one, we knew we didn't want to raise the kids in New York, right? So when the second one came and was a year old before he got into school age, we're like, we gotta make a decision. And deciding where is a lot of conversations of, again, narrowing down and hearing each other out and what each other needs are. And we ended up here because this place right outside of Miami fit what he needed career-wise and what I needed career-wise.
Yeah. And I love that because it speaks to the fact that when you're choosing a life partner, right, it goes all the way back to those initial conversations you have. And I think, in my 20s, when I think back to, luckily, Derek and I had a very long courting We dated each other for a very long time, but I think you do have to pick people who you feel like you can grow with. And you, like you said, people do evolve and people do change. That is something that happens. But the more that you can talk about your values up front and what you value and what you want in your life and get on the same page about that, the easier it'll be to adjust. So, one of the words that we bounced back and forth with when we talked about you coming on the podcast was handcrafted, because I do feel like your life is very specific to you. You have tailored it beautifully to work, in my opinion, to you. And I want to go over some of the things that you have done to, like, I know people may be wondering, like, what is handcrafted? What does that mean? And so you have a small business, right? A communications consultancy that you run. You also have a job that you work part-time in that you value and do great work at the director level. And I want to note that you work part-time at that job. So we'll get to the specifics of that. You have homeschooled your kids, you have homeschooled one, and now they're all back in school. You have spent the summer in the Dominican Republic. You have, you're thinking about relocating out of the country to live full time. And just, you've always been the type of person and what I've admired about you over the 20 years that we've been friends is that you've always done things. You always know exactly what will make you happy. And you're not shy about going about it, right? About expressing it and feeling content in that. So where does that come from?
Okay, so I think it comes in two waves, right? The first wave is I am an immigrant, meaning in my lifetime, I do remember my parents moving us from one country to the next and going through that adjustment. It was not easy, but for somebody that carries that in their DNA and in the feelings in this lifespan, it is not as hard to start again somewhere else because I've been through this, right? Like the move across state lines, I'm like, oh, that's easy compared to what I've already done in my lifetime, right? So I've lived in like 4 different states by now. And then number 2, I think that also comes with the paradigm shift and perspective shift that I got early on as an adult starting out. When I was 22, I, as you know, survived the World Trade Center attacks, right? And that, in hindsight, has been a gift to me because it gave me the gift of perspective. People think that when you say like, oh, life is short, like we kind of almost take it like for granted. But when you have lived and faced that early on, you realize that you don't have time to spend too many days upset, sad, or unhappy. Right? It can understand that tomorrow I could be going to work and that's my last day. So when you get that perspective at 22, you're going to try to figure out as quickly as possible what serves you, what does not serve you. And you're going to go and chase that, right? You're going to go because there's no time to waste. I don't know how long I have. And I have to get it all done and live a happy life. This is what we got. And, to me, it's like, this is part of living abundantly, right? I'm a Christian. So it's like when God said live it abundantly, it's not to live haphazardly or too cautiously or to fit and check somebody else's boxes. We've gone through that, right? Like checking the boxes that somebody else set for ourselves. I think that you realize, wait a minute, what do I want to do? And I check in with myself often. That's how it has happened for me. When the World Trade Center attack happened, that was the shift that also got me to apply to grad school where I met you. Because I said, this cannot be my life.
Yeah. Right? You were working in banking? What were you doing?
It was finance. It was financial. I was like, no. Within 6 months, by the way, at that job, I was like, no.
If you know Yadira, you know that her working in finance is like oil and water. The first sentence I heard this girl utter involved butterflies and monkeys. Okay.
You see my
that type of right. That type of person. I don't see him working in finance too much, but I definitely understand the impact that tragedy like that, especially early on. It's unfortunate that it has to be tied to tragedy that you realize the urgency of life and how life can be fleeting. I actually just read Bozoma St. John's book, Live Urgently. I think that's the name of it. It was really good. And she had come to determine that living life urgently due to several different tragedies in her life. And it's unfortunate that happens. But if you get the lesson in it, it can actually free you to live a better and a happier life. So I do want to get into the specifics of what you have done in your life because they're not traditional. So I'm going to take a piece of your family life and a piece of your professional life and kind of break down why you made those decisions. So we talked about Elvin, having a partner who is supportive and you share a vision for your life is important. So I'm going to talk about your kids now. We all had to homeschool at some point during COVID. You continued to homeschool after COVID. Why did you continue to do that? And what led to that decision and how do you fit it into your life now?
So after COVID, we decided to pull the children out of the school system, or after that first year, right? Like they finished that year, and we were not confident that they would be safe going back because there was no vaccine available, and that's not a risk that we wanted to take with our children. Right. And Elvin and I both had the flexibility that we work from home and the kids could stay here. So we put them in a remote program for the following year. And it was tough. 3 different levels, like a middle schooler. I had a middle schooler and 2 elementary school children at the time. So that we had to tag team in how we support. And, Elvin is a great partner in that too. So I'm not the only person like doing homework with the children. He took care of at least one of the kids. The oldest one is pretty independent, and then I supported the little one. I think the biggest shift happened the following year when I was a proponent of sending the kids back to school and Elvin wanted to keep the kids at home. And at that point, this is one of the interesting things about us, because we're like, we're not budging. Nobody's convincing anybody to come onto each other's side. So through a conversation I was having, I came up with this idea, like, what if we just let the kids decide? Because Elvin and I don't change, right? Like we're still here. But what about their needs? And 2 of them decided that they wanted to go to live school. And one of them decided that he wanted to stay home. So we just decided to support our children in their decision. And that's what we did for a whole year, the whole last year. Since I was the one that was proposing the kids going to school, I bit the bullet and I'm the one dropping off the kids at the wee hour of the morning. But
the trade-off was that they were in school all day.
Exactly. I mean, we had one here every single day. Decided to stay, but to me it is a gift to be able. It is also part of my approach to parenthood and to how I'm raising these children to be, that I respect the people that they are, and I always want to listen to their needs. It is not just what I say that goes, right. But they have agency, and I'm raising them to know that.
That's awesome, because I don't know if I ever would have given my kids the opportunity to stay home. Well, I guess I don't have 3 though. So, I have 2, and I feel like they probably both would want to stay home. But I don't know how well they would excel academically if that happened.
Whatever decision the parents had to make, it's sending them or keeping them, it was tough regardless. I understand both sides, and I say we're just trying to do the best we can as parents at this point.
I was going to say, you're in Florida. And I feel bad for all the parents in Florida who because they just make it so hard, especially Black parents. Like if you're raising Black kids in Florida, God bless you, because they just make it so difficult for you to do that and feel good about it, right? They do everything in their power to make you feel the opposite. And COVID is just one example. So let's switch to your professional life, because obviously keeping the kids home, homeschooling 3 and then homeschooling 1, that requires some flexibility. Yes, there are 2 parents in the house, so I do want to acknowledge the privilege in that. But when it comes to your professional life, you've also put up what I consider a pretty sweet setup with your job. You work in advertising. Tell me how you negotiated to be at the director level or senior director. I don't know what level you were at, but pretty high level executive, but also work part-time. This is what I need to take notes in. Go.
Okay, so first, I do want to clarify that the children were here, but I had them in a virtual program. So it was not, Elvin and I were not their teachers. We were just support people. So I just want to make that clear. If your state has a virtual program, which many should by this point, you can switch your kids if that's what you want to do. And it is just like a public school education. So outside of that parentheses, about work, at that time, I was a senior director. And when I took that job, I said, I'm going to give myself a year to figure out, am I done with the industry, or was it the agency that I was at that I got tired of because I have been there 6 years, to figure out if I still need to work in this industry. And at the year mark, I was feeling like this is not sustainable for my family because of, the responsibility that a job like takes, right? It is traveling, and I have 3 kids, and my kids were younger than they are right now, This was about 4 years ago. So it was taking a toll. And when I traveled, it was almost painful for me at that time because it was altering everyone's life in the home for me to be away from one night, So after that, I made the decision that, I need to do something else. I enjoy what I'm doing, but I don't necessarily enjoy all this time I'm dedicating, especially when my oldest was going into middle school and I was feeling like, oh my God, my baby's growing up so fast and I'm going to miss it. So at that point, I gave my supervisor like 4 months in advance, like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. I just want you to know, because I want you to be prepared and look for somebody else. And her response was crying. She cried. And I know, like, we are doing so well and we're working so well together. But I by the time the school year is over, I'm going to resign, and I want you to be prepared. At that time, she said, what are you going to do? And what is it that you want? And I said, well, I'm going to go into freelance work because I have about 20 hours a week that I am open to working, be it for whoever. I'm ready to do like project work and stuff like that. And what the agency came back with is, we'll take your 20 hours. Can you just give them to us consistently? And I said, sure. And then we went ahead and talked about what accounts I was going to keep and, things like that. And we negotiated pay. It was a similar situation too, like, what I thought was fair to me. And I said what I wanted, and they were able to meet that. So that's kind of like how that worked out in that situation. What I want to say about the greater pieces of the story is, I had been there a year. They had known the caliber of work that I was bringing to the table. They had already experienced me, right? And I knew that things were going well. And one of my quote unquote fears is, oh my God, if I don't tell her now, she's going to try to promote me. And that's not what I'm looking for.
Wait a minute. That's not what I expect you to say. I thought you were going to say, one of my fears was, I don't know, your fears were being promoted.
Well, that's why I said quote unquote, because
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not a conversation. I don't want them to be like so high thinking, oh my God, let's give her this gift. And I'm going
She
to be
wants
like,
to be a VP. Let's make her a partner. You're like, no.
nah.
Mm-mm.
So, so that happened. And then I took the time to write my book. I honestly thought I was saying bye to the industry. I'm like, this can't last too long, 4 years. And I got other responsibilities. This agency has been great and allowed me to grow and flex my wings where I've wanted to. I expressed an interest for DNI, and now I have a DNI title as well. And to me, it is just a second iteration of the work that I have been doing before, right? I think my advertising work had focused on the diversity part with Hispanics and being that expert, right? With the equity and inclusion added, is like I can think about this more holistically and help everyone get educated and come along.
Okay, so I want to talk about two things because I'm noticing a pattern with you. I think is that you have this ability to choose good partners. Now, I know that you've worked at different jobs and not every job was a good fit. But I think, what happens when you don't have good fits and when things don't work out, the lessons that you take from those experiences are only lessons if you can apply them going forward. So you have picked a good spouse that matches your needs for at home. You were able to pick a good partner for your professional career who saw you, who, wanted to hear what you wanted to accomplish, and they seem to value you. How do you go about making decisions about, who to go with, who to partner with? What are you taking into account when you are choosing, your next steps? How do you do that?
Like you say, not all of my matches have been great.
Right.
I think that my first two jobs, for one reason or another, felt painful at different times. And those were the lessons that helped me pick better next time. It was very clear to me in my first two jobs when I started feeling like I don't fit here. This does not feel right to me. I can't do this every day. So when that happens,
right,
that makes me more aware that the people that I work with, for lack of a better term, cannot be crazy. I need people that make sense and that understand the type of life that I want to live. Like, I am not living to work. I am working to live. You have to understand that I have 3 children and a spouse that are my priority. If you can't get that, like when I interview, I talk about that. And there are questions. There are questions that I have to get an idea. Do people have work-life balance here? How do moms do it? I want to get into the mind to understand, are moms being looked at cross-eyed when they're leaving to go pick up their kids? Or is this a normal thing for moms and dads here?
Right. And when you think about, for people who are not aware, when you work in an ad agency, and it may have changed over the years. I haven't worked in an agency in a really long time, but it is a career for a young person with no family who likes to go out, who likes to travel, who likes to work long hours. And it doesn't matter if you're working on potato chips, ice cream, beer, or pharmaceuticals. It's long, it's stressful. It's really a young person's job because you end up dedicating so much and spending so much time in the office. So I want to commend you for that. So most people sometimes stay in positions too long, even when they see the signs early on. They feel like, oh, it's going to get better. Oh, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not working hard enough. Maybe I didn't say the right things. And then ultimately you do come to the decision, maybe a little too late, that it's not you. So how long do you give yourself when you start noticing that things are not aligning to how you think they should align for you? How long do you give yourself to make a decision about what to do about it?
I would say once I start, like I mentioned earlier, I do regular check-ins with myself every 6 months to a year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's typically when it comes up, like, I don't feel this or I feel that. And then if I decide to do something about it, like, okay, I don't see anything here getting any better, then I start putting things in place and I start making my plans. Like, okay, what am I going to do between now and when am I going to make this move? So it starts, I almost plan backwards and it starts almost immediately. It may not be a quick jump, but we're going to start planning from today so that in 3 months I can be in a different place.
What does it look like to check in with yourself?
It is time alone, time thinking or meditating about what will make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
I love like just a folding chair at a park for me, or by the water. I am connected to nature, to myself, and I can think, I can journal. I sometimes take my journal because I like to listen to there's a lot of messages that we are hearing day in and day out from everywhere. What about ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Do we take the time to quiet down and listen to what we want? And that's how I do it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And you say you do that every 6 months to a year. You just check in. Do you go down a list? Do you look, you say family, like how do you run down the list to make sure you're fully checked in?
This is my passion. Let me tell you, I have, how I have mine right here. Look, I always keep it on my journal. This is my Sunny Life planner, and I create this every year. Typically at the beginning of the year, I do what is called a 10X life wheel, where it has 10 areas of your life and you get to grade yourself in how you think you're doing. Mm-hmm. So I go ahead and at the beginning of the year or towards the end of the year, I color it in based on what, where I think my life is for each of these areas. And then I pick 3 that that I need to grow, that I can do better mm-hmm. in. And those are my focus. Now, I look at that, I would say every quarter, every 6 months, to make sure that am I growing where I said I was going to grow? Have I put things in place for me to grow? And am I, do I feel better? Do I feel happier for having done that? For example, mm-hmm. this latter part of the year, I wanted my health to be priority. So I've started a workout and eating program, and I wanted my business to do some shifts. So I've been working with a coach for that. And, those are the kind of things that to me keep me going and keep mm-hmm. me excited about my life and about getting up every morning and doing something about what's going to make me happier.
Yeah. And you can see it on your face that you are happy. I think it's the haircut. I think it's the bouncy hair that helps. So we talked about, I think prior to us having this conversation, we talked about the idea of a permanent, an outlook that is more permanent versus one that is more temporary. And I think when we talk about the areas in your life and the shifts and the changes that you've made, I want you to talk a little bit about your perspective on change and how you see change and how you're so able to change different aspects of your life at any moment where you feel like it needs to be changed. I know some of that is your immigrant background, but some of that is mindset. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think that this first came, like I can recall exactly when this first happened to me, when I became a mom and I resigned my first position. Because I felt then as a 30-year-old that, oh my God, like my life is going to become like motherhood. I went ahead and I got all these degrees to become a mom.
Wait, and so were you happy with that? Was this a happy revelation? What kind of revelation was this?
Well, okay, so I was happy about having the ability to stay home with my child. Like, yes, I was excited about that. But at the same time, I'm freaking out thinking about the career that I have built and worked so hard to build, right? And I'm like,
Right.
nobody's gonna give me awards for changing diapers. Like,
Right.
come on.
Somebody
You know,
will. Your kids, the Lord.
really?
Right.
So that's what I thought. And the reason I bring this up is because in hindsight, I realized that was a temporary decision. That was
Right.
not going to be my life. I was thinking it was the rest of my life. This kid was not going to stay that little for that long.
Right.
And yes, we decided to have others, but even that, like, that is for a stage in my life. I can say I enjoyed that stage. And that stage had a lot to teach me about me as well. Because me learning about myself, I realized I can't stay here very long, because even though I love my children and I love teaching them and pouring into them everything I can, this does not make mom happy. Having only this doesn't make mom happy. Let me tell
Right.
you why that's important. My brain needed to be engaged. And I thought,
Right.
the more fulfilled I am as a woman, as a professional, the happier I'll be when I come home and be with my children. And I think that in my life, I want and I strive every day to show my children what a happy human being looks like. I think I do them a greater service doing that than sacrificing myself for them.
Right.
Right? I want them
Yeah.
to emulate that. Like, find your own happiness. Your mom found her own happiness. You can go ahead and find your own happiness, whatever that is. I will
Right.
support you, but you got to find your own.
Yeah, because kids really emulate what they see and not what you say. And you taking time out to make sure that you're happy, to be fulfilled in the areas that that make you happy is an example for them. And I think people do a lot to make their kids happy at the expense of themselves, right? And not saying that you don't want to make your kids happy, but if you're not happy, ultimately everything that you're doing for them, eventually they'll come to realize that those things won't make them happy. And so I mean, I think you have a great point there. The other thing, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna go back to the permanent and the temporary, but
Oh, yes.
before I got to that, I wanted to share that I came from parents that were very giving, and in that whose life still revolves around us.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily want to do that with my children. And I think we all parent in a way from the wounds that we personally have, or from the things we want to change about how our parents raised us. So I am very cognizant of that, right? Like, I don't want my children to think that my whole life revolves around them and my happiness revolves around them, because I don't want to tie them like that. I want them to feel like when I grow up and I become my own person, mom and dad will be okay. You know what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
back to that permanent versus temporary, we need to get away from planning life for the rest of our lives. Let's plan for 5 years, 10 years at a time, and that's okay. Coming back to work, which is one of the biggest fears for moms that are thinking about resigning, and will they be able to come back?
Right.
Yes. There are
Right.
many of us that have come back stronger, and you take care of life while it's happening, and take the time to do that and be present with that. And then when your children are school age, then you can come back and do
Yeah.
something that's fulfilling for you.
Yeah, and you also don't hear that narrative a lot. I mean, from what I hear, it's like, no, you can't come back. You will have lost, something. You will have lost skills. You would have lost connections. And so I'm glad to hear a counter narrative, because, just because it's the narrative that is out in the world that permeates, the blogs and the news cycle, doesn't mean that it has to be the thing that how your life unfolds. So I'm glad to hear that, because you do hear a lot. You can't take off, you can't go back because of patriarchy. You're not allowed to. But you are here as an example to other women that you can. And it's just about, again, finding the right partner to do that with, and making sure that your values kind of align with theirs. And also, I mean, I will say, I mean, this probably goes without saying, is that you also work hard. You also do great work. So you can't like divorce those two things. You still have to bring value, right? You still have to feel like you can add value to the organization that you're running with, because you can, if you are lackluster, if you have a lot to be desired at work, nobody's crying that you're leaving. Ain't nobody doing that. So there is a bit of a trade-off. Like, you can't expect to get these results when you didn't put in the work. So I just want to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said that I had spent a year at this agency and they had seen the quality of my work, right? So it's not, I didn't walk in making all these demands. They had seen and gotten to know what they could get from me and was willing to give.
And I also wanted you to focus on the temporary and permanent, because I think that's where I struggle sometimes, and I can get so wrapped up like, oh my God, retirement. Do I have enough? Am I saving enough? And to be honest, look, I'm saving as much as I can. There's nothing I could do about, a future that is 20 years out. What can I do right now to, plan my life? I don't even know if I'm gonna be around for 20 years. And why am I fretting about that? So I think, where you said about thinking 5 years out or maybe 10 years out at the most is, can be advantageous in not getting wrapped up and not feeling anxious about a future that you don't know. And then the other thing in that is you can always change your mind. And that is something that I learned, probably in my late 30s to 40s. Like, I can always change my mind about any decision. In fact, I admire people who change their mind, who change their opinion with more information and decide to pivot and do something else, because that's the harder thing to do. The easiest thing to do is to stay the course, even if it's tough, because people get used to tough. They get used to being unhappy. They get used to being, in this space that makes them feel bad, where, the other side of it looks scary. And so I admire people who say, I didn't like this, and I'm going to change this thing about myself or about my life that I don't want. So kudos. So I want to go ahead.
I wanted to comment on that, because what you are saying is exactly why I launched my mentoring program, My Intentional Joy. Because as you talk about planning for retirement, and this is conversations that Elvin and I are having now, why wait for retirement to do the things that we want to do?
Yeah.
What can we infuse from that vision that we have that we think is far away? What can we infuse into today? For us is we love to travel, and we love to go spend a month here and there, wherever, and we figure out how can we make these things happen and not just defer those happy moments for us. So I just wanted to share that we can bring that to the present life.
That is an excellent point, because you don't know what condition you'll be in. You don't know what the world will be in. I was like, I need to travel more because we are destroying the earth at a rapid pace. And there are things that I want to see before it's underwater or on fire. So let's talk a little bit about trade-offs. So it sounds really good for you to do this. But I know there has to be some things that you don't get because you've chosen a different path. So what would you say the trade-offs are to handcrafting your life in the way that you have?
So some of my trade-offs have been, I could be making twice as much money. Like, that's an easy one to see, right? And that's an okay trade-off for me. I do have the benefit of being in a, 2-income household, and, I'm not alone, I'm not single, raising these children. So it's okay. My advice to young women when I talk about this is grow your salary enough that if you want to cut it in half, you can still live.
Right. That's good advice.
Yes. And the other trade-off is benefits. Obviously, I don't have a company that offers benefits to me because I am considered a part-time employee. So the only benefit that I can get from the company is I can participate in the 401k.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, that's a big benefit. I mean, healthcare is, that's a big one too.
Like healthcare would be helpful, but they wanted more hours for healthcare, and I'm like, no. And then the 401k is, yes, I have that ability to still contribute to a 401k.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
So those are the kind of trade-offs that I can think of. I cannot think of anything else because, frankly, I've gotten a title change, so kind of like a promotion, even at my part-time level. I am very involved in the happenings of the agency, so I don't feel left out because I'm a part-timer. Actually, some people call me a permalance because so most people don't even know that I'm a part-time employee because I'm there when I need to be, and they see me when they need to see me, and they don't miss me otherwise.
They don't need to see you every day to feel your presence. Are there trade-offs with your family? Because you live in Florida. Most of your family lives in New York.
Yes,
Delaware.
I do miss them. I mean, when people ask me if I miss New York, I say no, but I miss my people. So my parents are in New York. My brother is in Connecticut and my sister's in Delaware. Those are the folks I miss the most. And obviously I left friends up there too. Mm-hmm. And I never imagined living so far away from them because we are so close.
Hi. Yeah.
So that has been a tough part of the last 11 years that we've lived here.
Well, if you decide to move to the Dominican Republic, you'll be even further. So,
Mom and Dad say they're going to come because now Mom will be ready to retire, but I believe that when I see that.
I'm about to say your mom should have been retired, but why? Okay. I'm just going to take a little detour. Why do you want to move full-time to the Dominican Republic? Why do y'all want to move full-time to the Dominican Republic before your kids graduate? This is not a retirement. Oh, after the kids go to college. This is next year, 2 years, whatever. Yes. Explain to me why.
Okay, so a couple of reasons. And one of them was what I had mentioned about the way we think about retirement. So one reason is Elvin and I were talking, and he's like, I don't want to wait to 20 years, 10 years to live my best life. I want to live my best life now. And we can't. We can't. Because who said that we couldn't, right? There's a lot of expats to many different countries like Portugal, Belize, all these places. So we can do that too. Reason number 2, and this is very important, and I take this very serious. He, as a Black man in the U.S., says, I don't feel the weight of my Blackness when I'm in the Dominican Republic. And that to me was like, whoa, because I have lived my life showing a Black man love as best as I can. And there are still things that I cannot protect him against. There are still things that are sad that I cannot take away. That all the joy that we have and peace in our home does not take away for him. And I'm raising 2 Black boys too. So when I think about that, I say, if there's anything in my power that I can do to give him a portion of life where he doesn't feel that weight, why not? Right? Like he deserves that. So that's reason number 2. Then reason number 3, why uproot the children now at this time? Now, let me tell you, I never imagined that I would be moving my children again. Because I said, this house that we live in, like, this is where they're leaving from. We're not doing this again. Have you ever moved with kids? Like this?
Yeah. That's a lot.
So with that said, when I think about the state of schools here in the US, I cannot believe what we're asking children to do and to live like. And I am telling you, even I'm sitting, yes, in a suburb, good schools, like, yes, this was carefully chosen for the kids, and still they have to do drills shooter drills. Still, they have to do all this stuff on a monthly basis. And I don't want my kids to live like that. I don't want to be scared if there's a bomb threat at a school. I don't want to feel that for my children. I don't want to feel that fear. And then I think in the Dominican Republic, kids are not worried about that. In the Dominican Republic, children are actually respected, and the whole community is looking out for the kids. So if I can give my children that, why wouldn't I? And because I'm Dominican, I can also, I think if I immerse them, they will pick up the language like natives. Right now, they're still speaking like they're Americans, as much as we've tried, and as many classes as they've taken, we're still working on it. So if I immerse them, they'll pick it up and they'll be like fluent and feel at home in both countries. So given that, give them that ability. But, they're not that happy with the choice. So that's why we're still, discussing, haven't made any concrete decisions. But those are the reasons why it weighs on us.
I mean, very well thought out, well articulated reasons. So I can tell you guys have spent a lot of time thinking about that. So as we wrap up our conversation, what piece of advice do you have for somebody our age, right? Where you have spent a long time living in a life that maybe you would choose to do differently. What I like to say with this podcast and to people who talk to me is that you can always change. You can always choose differently. Now, it may take some time and you may have to have some difficult conversations, but you can do it. What advice would you give somebody who wants to better handcraft, in your words, their life better as a 45-year-old or older, or, looking out?
So first, I would say, go ahead and get in touch with yourself and figure out what would bring you joy, what would bring you happiness, right? Like, let's get to the identification phase first. Once you identify what that is, plan and go get it, go do it. And, when I say plan, is figure out what are the steps for you to get there. Is it saving money? Is it getting more schooling or getting a certification or YouTube University? Like, whatever that is, that's going to bring you joy, that's going to bring you closer to what you really want, then, go ahead and plan and do that. And then do this regularly. If you need support, get around a circle of people that are also doing it. That has helped me out a lot. Feeling like, yes, I'm breaking the norm, but I'm not alone. And when I feel lack of energy, I have other women our age to support me, to bounce ideas off of, and to be able to give me some advice on the things that I don't know. So surround yourself with people that are like-minded, that are trying to also improve, better themselves, and change their lives like you are.
Awesome. Thank you, Yadira. I'm so glad that you came on. You put on your good lipstick for me. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you. And then for everybody else, I will see you next time.